Hello and welcome to Decks for Spring. So it is March 26th, so 5 or 6 days after the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere. I live in New England on the northeast coast of the United States, and spring sometimes takes her time getting here in the Northeast. I also live on Cape Cod, which is surrounded by water, and because the water cools off during winter, inland can be 70 degrees and will be 50, especially if there's a onshore breeze, because the breeze picks up the coolness from the water. And so spring comes here a little bit, week or two later than inland from us. But anyway, now that I've discussed the weather and the geography, I want to get into the decks for spring. So I don't always pull out decks for seasons, although I do have certain decks that I associate with certain seasons. And it is a good way to circulate your decks. When you get a kind of a larger size collection, you can either get stuck in a rut, or, there can be decks that are sort of on the back of the shelf or something like that, and you might forget about them. So there were actually a couple of decks here that I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't used you in a really long time. So anyway, let me get right into it. So the first deck I wanted to talk about was the Zillow Tarot by Christine Zillow. It's a Thoth-based deck, and it's a tarot in a tin, so it's on the smaller side. The art on this deck, I think, is absolutely stunning. I think it does really have a spring color palette. I don't use this deck a lot. I'm not really a Thoth person. I actually got this deck as a gift at the Reader's Studio probably 5 years ago or so. US Games gave these away as gifts to all the Reader's Studio attendees. And you can see that the color palette in this deck is really, first of all, it's something about the watercolor, I don't know, that makes me feel springy. I don't know, maybe because it rains a lot in spring, I'm not sure. But you see those kind of muted pastel-y colors and little pops of colors and little flowers peeking out and so forth. I just think this is a gorgeous deck, and I really don't use it that much. But I'm going to be traveling next month, and I think I'm just going to take small decks with me. So I think I will take this one with me. So that is the Zillow Tarot. I'll just finish up the cards that I pulled. What's this one? Hierophant. So that is a deck that I feel has a spring color palette. The next one is this lovely deck, the Moon Baby Tarot, that was reformatted by Brant Palazzo. He's on Moon Baby, that's his YouTube channel. And he took the hoi polloi and formatted it, cleaned it up, and he did change the color palette a little bit. It's still a really fun color palette, but the hoi polloi, which I think came out in the early 70s, had sort of a more psychedelic color palette to it. And this, I think, is really, really springy. You can see the greens and the pinks, and we see the like tulipy looking flowers here, the lavenders and purples. It's just a beautiful color palette. The pentacles all have this green in them. Even the moon is really springy looking. And I love that lavender and purple around here. We have crocuses that are purple and azaleas that are purple in the early spring. And then we move on into lilacs and other beautiful purple flowering shrubs and perennials. I love that. Look at that purple and the green. It's just lovely. Really springy feeling. Maybe more of a late spring on this one. And I just think this Six of Cups screams spring. So that's a beautiful deck. And that was one of the decks. Oh, and the, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's like a pale pink edging on this deck. So that was a deck that I had sort of forgotten about. I got it, I backed it on Kickstarter, and I think I got it last summer, and I used it quite a bit when I got it, and then kind of put it away for fall and winter, and just sort of forgot about it. And when I was thinking about spring decks, I thought, ooh, Moon Baby. So my next one is Tarot Fauna by Devin, I think her name is Strickler, and the artist is Brittany Burkhardt. I love the art on this deck. It's animal-based, as the name implies, Tarot Fauna. But that, to me, is such a spring green, that bright yellow green. It's so lovely. And, of course, what says spring more than that? So this, we have a lot of swans around us, and bears with their babies coming out. We do not have bears around here. We do have fox, however, and owls and otters. No moose. But the color palette here is lovely, and it just evokes a feeling of spring and newness and freshness. And here we see with the, this is called Mindfulness. This is an extra card. And we have the pansies, and really pansies are such a springy flower, in my opinion. Next is a deck that I always think of as a springy deck, although there are some summery looking cards, and this is the Tarot of Mystical Moments, and it's based on the art by Katrine Weltstein. And I love this deck. It's whimsical. It kind of surprised me that I liked this deck, that I bought this deck, because it's not the art style that I often go for. And in fact, one thing that I think is interesting is the same artist came out with a Oracle of Mystical Moments, and I didn't like it. And not that I didn't like it, but it just didn't call to me, and it still doesn't call to me. And yet it's the same artist and similar art to the tarot. But again, it's just got such a feeling of looking, those leaves look like they're just starting to branch out and burst out. And here we see this is very evocative of spring, the colors and the sense of newness, and like this, I don't know, something about this snail just makes me think of spring. This would be, of course, a later spring, although we do see tulips here, which we get around May. So again, it's the color palette, it's the blossoms, it's the sense of newness that just makes me think of spring. And I love using this deck during the spring. The last tarot that I wanted to show you kind of took me by surprise, and it's this one. It's the Spirit Keepers Tarot by Benebell Wen. This is the Revelation edition, so the most recent edition. And I had this, so this is a deck that I got. I have the first edition of the Spirit Keepers, which I have never used. And I had never used this one either, although I've had it for months and months. And I think I just sort of got intimidated or overwhelmed by the Jagundo Book of Maps, and just sort of the esoteric and the occult illusions that Benebell speaks about. And I just thought it was going to be too much. So I had this one out and I didn't use it and I didn't use it and I didn't use it. And finally I just was going to put it back. And I thought, oh, what the hell? Just friggin' throw out some cards and see what happens. So I did. And I'm finding it to be incredibly readable. I don't use the book of maps. I just read it intuitively and based on my own knowledge of tarot. And I had the cards out. I had a 3-card spread out, and then I did a 3-card spread from Moon Baby Tarot underneath it. And I thought, my goodness, these beautiful pastels are very, very springy. So I'm going to keep this one out and keep working with this one, you know, while we're moving through spring, because I feel like this as well has a really spring pastel color palette, and I'm really enjoying using it during this season. Okay, we're only 6 days into spring, but you know, I'm so happy that winter's over. So yeah, so that's the Spirit Keepers. And then I have 2 Oracle. So the first one is a favorite Oracle of mine. It's The Morning Calm by Seo Kelleher. I adore this. This is a lovely, lovely, beautiful Oracle deck that I use quite a bit, although I had put it away for some time, and I pulled it out recently, and I said, oh my goodness, this is really, this has a really spring feeling. So I'm going to keep this out, and I'm going to, you know, just pull a card here and there, because I feel it too has a real sense of spring to it. The color palette, I'm sorry, I should hold these closer. The color palette, look at that. Really soon we'll be having our crab apples will be in bloom, and that's what it will look like around here. That to me is such a springy seasonal card. And the color palette, the pastels, it's just a lovely deck, and I'm getting a real sense of spring from it. So let's see, here we go. Last but not least, the second Oracle I thought that has a real springy feeling to it is the Faceted Garden by Claire Mack. And this not only has a spring color palette, but the cards themselves, the titles speak to spring. So like this one, Thaw. So we've already gone through, at least here where I am, we've gone through that thaw. This is spring, and we are now into spring. We've passed the spring equinox. This reminds me of Aries. The title is Ram, but I couldn't help but think of Aries, which is, of course, the zodiac sign that we enter into on the equinox. This one is light, so the light is returning. We're getting more light. Days are getting longer. This one is seeds, so we've come into the time of year where we're planting our seeds. This is nest, and the birds are coming back and are much more noticeable. I'm hearing them. Pollinator, cultivator, spade. So it's the time of year where we're out in our gardens and we're, you know, pulling things out and putting things in, and it's a wonderful time for gardeners. Birth, bloom, morning song, and really now when I get up in the morning, I'm hearing the songs of the birds so much more than I did a month or 2 ago. This one is, I just thought the light gives me a sense of spring, and that spring green on the trees. Again, the pastel colors, this is Mineral Realm, and this also, I thought, Fountain, gives you a real sense of spring. So those are the decks that I will be using during this spring season. Tell me in the comments what you think of those decks, if you think they evoke spring, and what decks are you yourself using? What decks evoke spring for you? And I'm wishing everyone a happy spring, and may you find the joy of rebirth and regrowth as we go through the next few weeks and months of spring. Bright blessings to you all.